Greetings, everyone. My name is Amoy Gilding Bourne, and I am the spokesperson on agriculture under the Democratic Labour Party. Like you, I am a proud Barbadian. And over the past 6 years, I have watched the government operate with a troubling lack of accountability and transparency. I believe it is my duty to defend your rights, to defend your interests. I am here to ask the hard and uncomfortable questions and to ensure that checks and balances are in place so that the government is held accountable for its actions and sometimes its inaction. Today, I wish to address briefly four areas of concern. One, government initiatives and projects which lack accountability and transparency, the medicinal cannabis industry, lack of access to water, and the marginalization of agricultural lands. With respect to the first area of concern, we can start by looking at the sugar industry, which has essentially come to a halt in the blink of an eye. The future of Barbados' sugar industry is bleak. This, despite government statements that it would develop and modernize our mature industries. Up to now, the public has received no information regarding the agreement between government and Coop Energy in relation to the managing and financing of our sugar industry, nor have they been informed whether the government will maintain ownership of public assets, including Portvale Factory, the office buildings, the trucks, the harvesters. Neither has the government given the public any indication as to whether they have a definitive plan to increase the acreage under sugarcane cultivation. And the list of uncertainties goes on. The public has a right to know. Another project which draws the government's behavior into question is the Black Belly Sheep project. It is clear that the government failed to prioritize local interests and rubbish the principle that home drums beat first. Yet, the lack of transparency and accountability in this project is also glaring. Where can the public find an updated report from the ministry's consultant? Where is the empirical data that an objective observer can analyze? What revenue has Barbados generated from this project? What was the benefit to our local farmers? Barbadians have questions and they have a right to know. However, we have more questions than we have answers. Similarly, we recently heard our minister, Kerry Simmons, state that he signed several bilateral agreements with Venezuela so that 5,000 hectares of land in Venezuela can be made available for farmers, Barbadian farmers. I feel compelled to remind the minister that Venezuela has and still is battling from the effects of a destabilized government. Covering or protecting Barbadian citizens in another country under political upheaval is a scary thought. Any project or agreement such as this requires a thorough assessment and calls for heightened involvement and collaboration with the country's agricultural professionals, especially the Barbados Agricultural Society, and more so, the farmers themselves. The government needs to engage with the farmers on a more meaningful level so that they too can be involved in how their livelihood is developed. However, there's no such evidence. There's no evidence that such due diligence was done. And if due diligence was done, where can we find that information? Barbadian farmers have questions. They have a right to know. And the questions continue. When we look at the next area of concern, the medicinal marijuana industry, there's no secret that cannabis has been used for or is being used for medicinal and recreational purposes and has become a multi-billion dollar, that's billion with a B, multi-billion dollar industry. And once structured correctly, the government has the potential to gain so much. They have the potential to reap financial rewards and economic benefits. However, government's decision to develop the industry has raised considerable debate. and Bajans want to know what is happening with our medicinal cannabis industry. In 2022, remember the government said they would make Barbados the owners of the medicinal cannabis industry. But the silence surrounding this development is deafening. Now in 2024, earlier this year, we hear government itself say that it is not only going to regulate the cannabis industry, but is also now going to be a player within the medicinal cannabis space. My, how the tables have turned. How does this benefit persons who have already got licenses? How does this benefit those that are involved? Is the government now going to be a competitor of those same persons that they said would make the owners of the medicinal marijuana industry? The public has questions and they need answers. It is also imperative for government to provide the people of Barbados with an account of the $25 million that was allotted for the development of the medicinal marijuana industry. Let's say medicinal cannabis industry. Given the high cost of licenses, last time I checked, a tier 1 license was beginning around $29,000. And given that 30 or more of those licenses, tier 1, tier 2, and up, have been already granted, what is the current financial standing of the industry, which has yet to produce a bud or a blade of grass? Or has it? We need to know. How many foreign investors are there? How many local investors or owners are there? What profits have been made? Has there been a cannabis crop? If so, what has happened to it? Has it been exported? These are burning questions that the public has a right to know. Unfortunately, we haven't heard much from the Medicinal Cannabis Licensing Authority, and the government is quite hush-hush with respect to any developments that are going on within the cannabis industry. But Barbadians have a right to know. It is high time we have this discussion. The next concern I wish to address is the lack of access to water for agricultural purposes. This directly affects the level of food production in this country. And with government's nonchalant attitude with respect to handling its water resource management efficiently, the future does not bode well for agriculture and farming. I've said it before, and it is worth repeating again. The World Health Organization has designated Barbados as a water scarce country. What this means is that we use 25% or more of our renewable freshwater resources to meet water demands. This is concerning as it also contributes to the less than expected levels of agricultural production. We have seen our sweet potatoes and onions. We've seen difficulties with those production. While the provision of water tanks is admirable and is a step in the right direction, I am calling on the Minister of Agriculture to seriously focus on water harvesting technologies and policies geared towards the provision of water for agricultural purposes. We must capitalize on the abundance of rainfall we get, when we get it, and harvest that water, which can be stored and used for agricultural purposes. Have you ever seen the amount of water that runs off of Oystons Hill under heavy rainfall? There are other areas in Barbados which are just like this. There needs to be rigorous planning and development in this area, and Barbadians have to be a part of the process. The government cannot continue to do the same thing and expect different results. Why not challenge the engineers at the Barbados Water Authority to come up with a design to capture this runoff rainwater? Why not extend that challenge to relevant companies in the private sector? Involve the public, seek innovative designs, consult with neighboring territories which have the same water scarcity problem but have been successful in their harvesting of water. For example, the Cayman Islands, who uses a cistern system, and they have an underground cistern which captures the water running off from the gutters and streets. We can do better. We can do better. Barbadians deserve better. The very existence of our agricultural industry depends upon it. The last concern I wish to briefly address at this time is the marginalization of agricultural lands. This concerns me immensely. It does. In 2022, the government made promises that it would modernize and develop and improve the technology within our agricultural sector, attract young people, make the lives of farmers better, and develop or contribute to the island's sustainable development through food security. However, actions speak louder than words. Government's continued marginalization of agricultural lands is a major factor contributing to the nation's food insecurity. While the government has set laudable goals, it has become its own saboteur. We saw what occurred with Heartland Estates. And more recently, we saw government's acquisition of 50 acres of arable land at Draxall to use for housing development for lower and middle income housing. We also heard the residents of Ballantyne, through their spokesperson, speak out against government's attempted acquisition of another 122 acres of agricultural land, again for housing development. And if not for the public outcry, and if not for outspoken agriculturalists, that would have been a great loss to our agricultural sector, despite Minister Ware's statement that I would not have harmed the agricultural sector in any significant way. Rubbish. And while I agree that the provision of housing is important, it cannot be at the sacrifice of our agricultural lands. It just simply cannot. And our agricultural lands only cover a minuscule 26% of the land area in Barbados. As spokesperson for agriculture and a member of the farming community, this deeply concerns me. How does the government plan to boost agricultural production? We have already seen lower than normal levels of production and consequently higher importation of foodstuffs, for example, pork and chicken, products that traditionally have been sourced locally. But that is no longer the case. This must be addressed. Government's promise to make the lives of Barbadian farmers easier is a noble one, but our farmers are not happy, and they've repeatedly raised concerns and red flags, such as the continuous rise in feed prices and molasses, which is now at $12 a gallon. $12. More must be done. I am therefore calling on the minister to consider implementing agricultural zoning as a means of safeguarding the very assets upon which our agricultural industry is based. Zoning will help curtail the conversion of agricultural lands for non-agricultural uses. It is something that the government needs to heavily consider. And as I understand it, zoning was something that was done in the past. So the government needs to consider reintroducing this initiative because it could help. Also, an amendment to the Planning and Development Act of 2019 would assist in limiting the control of the minister responsible for town and country planning, who has sweeping powers to unilaterally earmark agricultural land for development projects. Agricultural lands must be protected. Period. Fellow Barbadians, our mission is simple: to serve with integrity and to work tirelessly to represent the best interests of all Barbadians. The Democratic Labour Party is here to stand with you and to work for you. Together, we can build a brighter future for Barbados. God bless and see you next time.